Hello and welcome to Chess with Simon. I'm Simon. Today we are going to talk about how to defend against the Evans Gambit, which is a very sound and sharp opening that White sometimes plays. If you play Bishop c5 against the Italian, now if you play Knight f6, they can't play the Evans Gambit, but they play different things like Knight g5. But anyway, here it is. Evans Gambit, pawn b4. So White gives up a pawn but gets a lot for it. So the absolute main line is to take. White plays c3, which is going to be supporting d4. Black backs off. White plays d4. Black takes, and of course the thing is, you say, well, White can't take back because the pawn is pinned, but White just goes ahead and castles. Now I used to play, the engine wants to play knight f6. I always used to play knight g e7, and then the most popular move is knight g5, hitting f7. Black's playing d5. It gets taken, and then the knight jumps here. Queen here. Pawn f6. So what do we make of this? Well, there are many lines in the Evans, and this is certainly sharp and messy. And if you're going to play this as black, you've got to know what you're doing. You can just look at it to know how sharp it is. Now, there are also other interesting ideas as black. For instance, instead of playing knight g7, we can actually even take the pawn. There was a Bobby Fischer game where black took the pawn. And so black has now won 3 pawns. 3 pawns up. A lot of pawns. What's the main line? Queen b3, queen f6. Black's actually not busted here. We play e5, queen g6, knight takes, knight g7. Actually, amazingly or fascinatingly, it's a balanced game. Bishop a3. But certainly, one would have to say it's a very sharp game. So that's sort of what happens when you play bishop a5, which is the sort of the most popular move and the engine move. But other moves are available. Another move is bishop e7. And then the way it always used to be played was White would play d4. Black would hit the bishop. This would give White the chance to take here, defending the bishop, and then you go takes, takes. You play d5. White takes it. Black takes it. The knight goes to e3, and then I used to play queen a5. And, this position, White's got a bit of space, but it's sort of a strategic position. Black's got the 2 bishops. Black's got a better pawn structure. Actually, and the engine does have black slightly better here. The problem is this, though, or not a problem, is that, so here we chose bishop e7. And then when we go to the d4, when we go to the rim, knight a5, which is by far the most common move and the engine move, White can play bishop e2, and actually that's the engines want bishop e2 or bishop d3. And that's all a bit more tricky. So maybe the main line is d6. The most common is d6. There's a check here that doesn't win the knight because luckily pawn c6 allows the queen to defend the knight. But takes, 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 wins a pawn. We develop the knight. Castles. And then I don't know what happens here. What does the engine want? Queen c7. The point is, it's okay, but it's a complicated position. You've got to know what you're doing again. So bishop e7 can still become really complicated. Now, what has been interesting for me is I saw a Banter Blitz game where Peter Lecco declined the gambit, just played bishop b6. And he got what he described as a sort of normal Italian. But by far the most common move here is a4. And then we need to avoid getting the bishop trapped, as we might do after a5 and c3. So we play a6 to give the bishop an escape square, then White just develops, then Black develops. Knight d5, we can take that, and we're getting a pretty normal game. Knight d4, just for the record, White can't take on e5, because I think queen e7 probably wins a piece, doesn't it? Well, do you know what? Let's have a look. Maybe it doesn't. Oh, because they castle. Okay, no, I'm wrong about that. So the reason white doesn't take there, apparently, is because of d6. And then, well, let's just assume the knight goes back. Help me understand what's going on here. Bishop g4. Okay, maybe what we're saying is we're slightly better developed. It's only a doubled pawn. Takes, takes, takes. We're just sort of saying we're better developed. We're a pawn down, but it's a double pawn. We've got compensation. The answer is we've got compensation if white takes on e5. But the real point is, after the Evans Gambit declined, we've got sort of a normal game because the bishop's pretty good on b6 and the pawn on b4 isn't doing a great deal. Another thing we should check out, by the way, is if instead of a4 they play pawn b5, then we play knight a5 attacking the bishop, and then white has this very critical line where you're taking on e5, you're planning to take on f7. Now, it looks possible to take the bishop on c4. What when you take on c4? When you take on c4, white takes back and the game goes on. And I think the concept here is that we're a pawn down. It's kind of that simple, right? We're just a pawn down. And the pawn down we are is e5. So, actually, white has quite a lot here. White has an attack on f7 and a pawn. So what we do is we defend the attack. The bishop can run to e2. But I want to look at the critical line where white plays d4, trying to take on h6. And then take on f7. Luckily, we've just got time for d6. And then, now this is a problem because now the bishop on c4, the knight can't move because the bishop on c4 drops. So white tries to go full in. We take on e5, but now they've got two bishops hanging, one on c4 and one on h6. Bishop takes here. We play rook g8. And all of a sudden, white's got two pieces attacked, so white's losing a piece. And we're winning. We're winning. So that's very good. So the point is, let's think about this. I mean, it's always good to think in chess, right? So the point is that white is a pawn up. So here, if you go bishop e2, why... Oh, look at this. Beautiful. Bishop d4. Wow. Bishop d4. And then the knight moves out of the way. And then, don't we just take it? And then we take the rook? So, well, the engines are a bit undecided. But if we take it, maybe they're going to play c3, are they? Are they? Yeah, c3. Okay, and then you can sack the bishop or something on f2. So that's one way. But instead of taking it, you can take on a1, and then they take the knight, and you say, well, it's an exchange. It's an exchange for a pawn. Okay, so fine. So the whole point is, in this position, although they can take the pawn, you can't quite sustain it because the bishop on c4 is vulnerable. You've got d6 coming. You can defend f7. You can basically... I mean, by the way, there is also this queen g5 move here, which is kind of in the style of the Latvian gambit. So this sort of move where, you know, you allow knight f7, you allow the fork, you take on g2. This happens in the Latvian as well, which is a famous unsound opening, unfortunately, because I love it. And so the engine wants... Either we take the bishop, or we take on e4 with check. Okay, so the point is there's an ultra sharp line, but the real issue is once white takes on e5, actually, after knight h6 even, white's got problems. White can't hold the position together. The position just doesn't quite... There are just too many threats. Because there's the threat of bishop d4, there's a threat of taking on c4, and white's threats don't come quickly enough. Which I think means that if you play the Evans Gambit declined, you get a decent sort of solid position, and if white overpresses and tries to play a critical line and force it, actually it can backfire, and white can lose as much as a piece, actually reasonably easily. I hope you enjoyed that. I enjoyed that. I'll see you all soon.